You know what's worse than being stabbed in the back? Being erased from existence while you're still breathing. For 7 years, I secretly paid my mother-in-law's mortgage. Last Tuesday, at her will reading, her family acted like I was invisible. But here's the thing they didn't know. I had every single receipt. Look, I'm not the type to air dirty laundry on the internet, but sometimes life throws you such a curveball that you gotta share it with someone, you know? My name's Marcus. I'm 34 and I work construction in Sacramento. Nothing fancy, just an honest guy trying to make it work. This whole mess started back in 2017 when I married Sarah. Sweet girl, but her family? Man, that's where things got complicated. Her mom, Patricia, we called her Pat, was this widow living in this gorgeous Victorian house in Midtown. You know the type, the ones with the wraparound porches and those fancy bay windows. Yeah, that was Pat's place. Now Pat was, how do I put this nicely? She was old school, real old school. The kind of woman who'd smile to your face at Sunday dinner but whisper to her daughter about how that boy isn't good enough for you when she thought I couldn't hear. And trust me, I heard everything. But here's the thing about me, I don't hold grudges. My mama raised me to respect my elders, even when they don't respect you back. So when Sarah mentioned one evening, about 6 months after our wedding, that her mom was struggling with the mortgage payments, I didn't even think twice. How much does she owe monthly? I asked, stirring my coffee. About $1,800, Sarah said, not looking up from her phone. Mom's too proud to ask for help, but her Social Security barely covers utilities and groceries. I did the math in my head. With overtime, I was pulling in around $4,200 a month. We were renting a small apartment for $1,400, and after all our expenses, we had maybe $800 left over. But you know what? Family is family. What if we help her out? I suggested. Sarah's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Really? You do that? Of course. But maybe we don't tell her it's coming from us. You know how she gets about accepting help. That's how it started. Sarah would find extra money every month. Sometimes she'd say she got a bonus at work. Sometimes she'd claim she won a scratch-off ticket. Pat would reluctantly accept it, always with some comment about how the Lord provides in mysterious ways. What Pat didn't know was that the Lord was a guy in work boots who got up at 5 a.m. every morning to frame houses. The arrangement worked for a while. Sarah would deposit the money into Pat's account, and Pat would make her mortgage payments. I felt good about it, you know, like I was doing something meaningful. Sarah was happy, Pat kept her house, and I was the invisible hero of the story. But as the months turned into years, something started eating at me. Every family gathering, every holiday, every Sunday dinner, Pat would go on and on about how blessed she was, how God was taking care of her, how she was managing all on her own. And there I'd sit, cutting my pot roast, knowing damn well I was the one keeping that roof over her head. Still, I kept my mouth shut. That was the deal, right? By 2019, I was starting to feel the strain, not just financially, though scraping together that $1,800 every month was getting tighter, but emotionally. You ever feel like you're living in a parallel universe where everyone knows a different version of the truth? That's exactly what family dinners became. Pat would hold court at the head of her mahogany dining table, talking about her independence and how proud she was to be managing everything without being a burden to anyone. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there thinking about how I'd worked a double shift the day before just to make sure her mortgage cleared on time. The worst part? Her other kids, Sarah's siblings, ate it up. There was David, her oldest, this hotshot lawyer from San Francisco who'd roll up in his Tesla twice a year and lecture everyone about fiscal responsibility. Then there was Jennifer, the middle child, who lived in Portland and worked for some nonprofit, always going on about authentic living and finding your own path. Neither of them contributed a damn dime to their mother's expenses, but they sure loved to praise her for being so strong and so independent. During one particular dinner, I remember it was Thanksgiving 2019. David was going on about some investment strategy, while Jennifer nodded along, sipping her organic wine. Pat was beaming, talking about how she'd just made another mortgage payment all by herself. "It's incredible, Mom," Jennifer said, reaching over to squeeze Pat's hand. "You're such an inspiration. Managing this beautiful house, staying financially stable. Not everyone your age can say that." "Well," Pat said, with that smile she got when she was feeling particularly proud, "I've always been resourceful. Your father taught me to stand on my own 2 feet." I nearly choked on my stuffing. Sarah caught my eye from across the table and gave me this look. Part apology, part, "Please don't say anything." So I didn't. I just nodded and complimented the cranberry sauce. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling. Sarah was already asleep, but I was staring at the ceiling, doing math. $1,800 times 24 months. I'd paid almost $44,000 toward Pat's mortgage. That was more than my truck was worth. Hell, that was more than some people make in a year. "Hey," I whispered to Sarah. "You awake?" She mumbled something and rolled over. "Do you think we'll ever tell your mom the truth?" This time she opened her eyes. "About what?" "About us paying her mortgage. About where the money's really coming from." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Why would we do that?" "Because, I don't know, because it's the truth. Marcus, you know how she is. If she knew we were helping, she'd be mortified. She'd probably try to pay us back or sell the house or something dramatic. But don't you think her other kids should know? I mean, they're praising her for being so independent when..." "When what?" Sarah's voice had an edge to it now. "When she's actually being helped by her son-in-law? Marcus, we agreed to keep this quiet. It's better this way." Maybe she was right. Maybe it was better. But lying there in the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being erased from my own good deed, like I was a ghost haunting someone else's success story. The next month, I started keeping receipts. Not because I was planning anything, I just wanted proof that this was really happening. Bank statements, transfer records, screenshots of my online banking. I told myself it was just for my own records. But deep down, I think I knew I'd need them someday. By 2020, the secret was starting to eat at me in ways I didn't expect. COVID hit, construction slowed down, and suddenly that $1,800 felt like a mountain I had to climb every month. I was picking up weekend work, side jobs, anything to keep that money flowing to Pat's account. But here's the kicker. While I'm busting my ass to keep her house, Pat's getting more and more comfortable with what she thought was her own financial success. She started talking about maybe renovating the kitchen, possibly getting the roof redone. You know, the kind of projects you consider when you think your money situation is stable. "I've been so blessed," she told Sarah one afternoon when we stopped by. "My finances have been steady for years now. I think I can finally splurge a little." Sarah and I exchanged glances. I wanted to say something, anything, but Sarah jumped in first. "That's great, Mom, but maybe wait until you have a bigger cushion saved up." Pat waved her off. "Honey, I've been managing just fine. I think I know my own finances." The irony was killing me. She didn't know her own finances at all. If she did, she'd know that some guy named Marcus Rodriguez was the reason she could sleep peacefully every night. That summer, things got worse. My company lost a major contract, and I was down to 3 days a week. Sarah was working at a dental office, but her hours got cut too. We were eating ramen for dinner and shopping at the dollar store. But somehow, we still managed to scrape together Pat's mortgage payment. I remember one particularly rough week in July. I'd been job hunting for days, our bank account was down to $67, and I was stress-eating gas station coffee when Sarah called. "Mom wants to have a family barbecue this weekend," she said. "She's talking about catering it from that expensive place downtown." "Sarah, we can barely afford groceries right now." "I know, but she's so excited. She keeps talking about how well she's doing financially, how she wants to treat everyone." I wanted to scream. Here I was, literally choosing between groceries and gas money, while Pat was planning to blow money on fancy catering because she thought she was flush with cash. But the worst part? When we showed up to that barbecue, David was there with his wife and kids. They'd flown in from San Francisco, and he was going on and on about Pat's amazing financial management skills. "Seriously, Mom," he said, gesturing around the beautiful backyard with his beer, "you've really figured it out. This house, staying independent, even having money for events like this, you're like a financial guru." Pat practically glowed. "Well, I've always been careful with money. Your father would be proud." Jennifer chimed in from the deck. "It's so inspiring, Mom. In today's economy, to be your age and completely self-sufficient, that's incredible." I was standing by the grill, flipping burgers, listening to this whole conversation. Sarah was inside helping with sides. So it was just me and Pat's kids celebrating her independence that I was literally funding. "Yeah," I said, not looking up from the grill. "It's pretty amazing what people can accomplish when they put their minds to it." David nodded seriously. "Exactly. It's all about discipline and planning. If only he knew about the discipline it took for me to work 60-hour weeks so his mom could buy organic steaks for a family barbecue." That night, I made a decision. I started documenting everything. Not just the financial records, I already had those, but the conversations, the comments, the way Pat's family praised her for achievements that were literally funded by my overtime hours. I wasn't planning anything vindictive. I just needed to preserve the truth, even if nobody else wanted to hear it. The breaking point came in 2021. But not in the way you'd expect. Sarah and I had been trying to buy our own house for years. But every time we saved up enough for a down payment, life would happen. Car repairs, medical bills, you know how it goes. But the real reason we couldn't get ahead was that $1,800 disappearing from our account every month. "We need to talk about your mom's mortgage," I told Sarah one evening after we'd been house hunting all weekend. We'd looked at this perfect little ranch house in Elk Grove. Nothing fancy, but it had a garage and a backyard where we could maybe start a family someday. The realtor said we'd need about $15,000 down plus closing costs. We had maybe $8,000 saved. "What about it?" Sarah asked, though I could tell she knew where this was heading. "We've been paying it for 4 years. That's over $86,000, Sarah. We could have bought our own house by now." She got that defensive look she always got when we talked about her family. "Marcus, we've been over this. Mom needs our help, but her other kids don't even know we're helping. They think she's some kind of financial wizard. Meanwhile, we're living in a cramped apartment, driving cars that are falling apart, and putting off having kids because we can't afford anything." "So what are you saying? We should just abandon her?" "I'm saying maybe her other kids should contribute too. David makes probably 3 times what I make. Jennifer's always posting about her European vacations on Instagram. Why is it all on us?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Because they don't know she needs help. Then maybe we should tell them." "Absolutely not. We agreed to keep this private." That conversation stuck with me for weeks. I started paying closer attention to David and Jennifer's social media, their lifestyle, their spending habits. David had just bought a boat. Jennifer was renovating her Portland condo. Meanwhile, I was working construction in 105-degree heat to pay their mother's bills. But here's what really got me. Pat started talking about her will around this time. Not in a morbid way, just casual mentions about making sure everything is taken care of and the importance of legacy. She'd bring it up at family dinners, usually after a glass or two of wine. "I want you kids to know I've been working with a lawyer," she said one Sunday. "Everything's going to be handled properly when I'm gone." "Mom, don't talk like that," Jennifer said, but she was clearly interested. "No, it's important. This house, my savings account, everything's going to be divided fairly. I want you all to know that I've been responsible with money my whole life, and there'll be something for everyone." David leaned forward. "That's smart, Mom. Estate planning is crucial." I'm sitting there thinking about how there wouldn't be any house to inherit if I hadn't been paying for it. But I kept my mouth shut. Again. After dinner, I found myself in Pat's study, looking at old family photos while Sarah helped with dishes. There was her wedding photo with Sarah's dad, pictures of the kids growing up, David's law school graduation, Jennifer's college photos. Normal family stuff. But then I noticed something. In all the recent photos, the ones from after 2017, I was barely in any of them. Oh, I was there, but I was always on the edge, or partially cut off, or somehow not quite part of the frame. It was like I was systematically being edited out of the family narrative. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just being erased from the financial story, I was being erased from the family story too. I was good enough to pay the bills, but not good enough to be considered a real part of the family. I started taking my own photos after that. Not obviously, just casual shots at family events. I wanted proof that I was there, that I existed, that I was part of this family that I was literally supporting. Looking back, I think that was when I started preparing for what was coming, even though I didn't know it yet. Things got really interesting in 2022 when Pat had her health scare. She'd been having chest pains and ended up in the ER on a Tuesday night. Turned out it was just anxiety. The doctor said it was pretty common for people her age, but it shook everyone up. Sarah and I rushed to the hospital, and so did David and Jennifer. For about 48 hours, we were all just focused on making sure Pat was okay. But once she was stable and back home, the conversations started getting, well, let's just say they were eye-opening. "Mom, we need to talk about your affairs," David said during one of our visits. "This scare made me realize we don't know much about your financial situation." Pat was resting on the couch, looking smaller than usual in her purple robe. "What do you mean?" "Well, like, do you have enough saved for medical emergencies? Are your insurance premiums manageable? Are you keeping up with all your expenses?" This was rich, coming from the guy who hadn't asked about her finances in years. But Pat just smiled, that proud smile of hers. "Oh, honey, I'm doing just fine. Better than fine, actually. I've been managing everything perfectly for years now. My mortgage is current, I have a little cushion in savings, and I've even been able to do some improvements around the house." Jennifer nodded approvingly. "That's incredible, Mom. You're like a financial role model." I was sitting in the corner, watching this whole performance. Sarah was holding Pat's hand, smiling along with the lie we'd been living for 5 years. And I'm thinking about how I'd just worked overtime 3 nights that week to make sure Pat's mortgage payment would clear on time. "Actually," Pat continued, "I've been thinking about updating my will, making sure everything's properly documented." David perked up. "That's smart. Do you want me to look it over? I mean, I know estate law isn't my specialty, but I could review it." "That would be wonderful, dear. I want to make sure everything goes to the right people. The house, my savings, everything I've worked so hard to maintain." Everything she'd worked hard to maintain? I nearly laughed out loud. But then Pat said something that really threw me. "I especially want to make sure the house goes to someone who'll appreciate it, someone who understands the value of what I've built here." The way she said it, looking directly at Sarah, made it clear who she had in mind. And suddenly I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. I wasn't just paying Pat's mortgage, I was paying for Sarah's inheritance. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that house, about the equity I'd been building in someone else's name. If Pat's mortgage was around $1,800 a month, and I'd been paying it for 5 years, that was over $100,000 I'd contributed. In a market where houses were appreciating like crazy, that was probably hundreds of thousands in equity. Equity that would go to Sarah when Pat died. Which meant it would technically be ours eventually, right? I tried to convince myself that was the plan all along. That Sarah knew her mom would leave her the house, so we were essentially paying our own future mortgage. But something about the way Pat talked about the right people and someone who'll appreciate it made me wonder if I was being naive. "Hey," I whispered to Sarah in the dark. "Do you know what's in your mom's will?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, like, is she leaving you the house?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "We've never talked about it specifically, but you assume she is, right? I mean, you're her daughter. You're the one who's been helping her. Marcus, I don't think about stuff like that. It's morbid. But I could tell she was thinking about it now. And honestly, so was I. For the first time in 5 years, I was thinking about this whole arrangement as an investment rather than just charity. That was probably my first mistake. The will conversations became more frequent after Pat's health scare. She seemed to bring it up every time we visited, like she was testing the waters or something, and each time the story got a little more elaborate. "I've been so blessed to be able to keep this house," she'd say, gesturing around the living room. "It would break my heart to think of it going to someone who didn't understand its value." Or, "I want to make sure whoever inherits this place knows how much work I put into maintaining it. It's not just a house, it's a legacy." The thing is, I was starting to see Pat differently. All those years, I'd thought of her as this proud but struggling widow who was too stubborn to ask for help. But now I was wondering if she was actually pretty savvy. Think about it. She'd managed to get her mortgage paid for 5 years without anyone knowing she was getting help. She'd maintained her image as this independent, financially stable woman while basically having a secret benefactor. That takes some serious skill, but it also made me start questioning things. If Pat was smart enough to orchestrate this whole arrangement, what else was she planning? In October 2022, she made an announcement that caught everyone off guard. She'd hired a financial advisor. "I want to make sure I'm being smart with my money," she told us over Sunday dinner. "I've been doing well on my own, but I think it's time to be more strategic." David was impressed. "That's brilliant, Mom. Who were you working with?" "A lovely woman named Margaret Chen. She specializes in retirement planning and estate management. We've been going over all my accounts, my assets, everything." I nearly choked on my pot roast. If this Margaret person was reviewing Pat's finances, wouldn't she notice that $1,800 was mysteriously appearing in her account every month? After dinner, I pulled Sarah aside. "Don't you think this financial advisor is going to figure out about the mortgage payments?" Sarah looked worried for the first time in months. "I didn't think about that. What if she asks Pat where that money's coming from?" I don't know. Maybe we should talk to Mom about it." But we didn't. Instead, we waited. And about 3 weeks later, Pat called Sarah with the strangest news. "The most amazing thing happened," she said, practically bubbling with excitement. "Margaret was going through my accounts, and she found this error the bank had been making. They've been depositing extra money into my account for years, some kind of computer glitch with automatic transfers." Sarah went pale. "What kind of error?" "About $1,800 a month. Can you believe it? Margaret said I need to contact the bank immediately to report it, but honestly, I'm not sure I want to. I mean, it's been helping me keep the house all these years. Maybe it's just the universe providing." I was standing in the kitchen listening to this phone call, and I swear I felt something cold run down my spine. This wasn't a coincidence. Pat knew exactly where that money was coming from, and she was testing us. "Mom," Sarah said carefully, "maybe you should just let Margaret handle it." "Oh, I already did. She's going to investigate the source of the deposits. She says it's important to have a clear financial picture for estate planning purposes." That night, Sarah and I had our first real fight about the mortgage payments. "She knows," I said. "She's known this whole time." "You don't know that." "Sarah, come on. A financial advisor doesn't just stumble across $1,800 monthly deposits and call them a bank error. Pat told her exactly what to look for." "Even if she knows, so what? We've been helping her. That's not a crime." "But don't you see? She's been playing us. All this time we thought we were being secretive and noble, but she's been letting us pay her mortgage while she takes credit for being financially independent." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing." "What do you mean?" "Maybe she's been protecting our secret. Maybe she knows we're helping, and she's been covering for us with the family." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But something about the way Pat had been talking about her will, about the right people, about legacy and appreciation, it felt like she was setting up for something. And I was starting to think that something didn't include me. Margaret Chen turned out to be a lot more thorough than any of us expected. By December 2022, she'd apparently mapped out Pat's entire financial life, including the mysterious $1,800 monthly deposits that had been keeping the house afloat. Pat called a family meeting for the week before Christmas. Not unusual in itself. She always liked having everyone together for the holidays, but this time felt different, more formal. She asked everyone to come to the house Sunday afternoon, said she had important family business to discuss. David flew in from San Francisco. Jennifer drove down from Portland. Sarah and I just had to drive across town, but somehow I felt like we were traveling the furthest distance. When we all gathered in Pat's living room, the same room where I'd heard countless conversations about her independence, she had a folder full of papers on the coffee table. "I want to talk to you all about my will," she said, settling into her favorite armchair. "Margaret has helped me organize everything, and I think it's time you knew what my intentions are." David leaned forward. "This is smart, Mom. Transparency is important." "Yes, well, I've tried to be fair to everyone. The house, as you might expect, will go to Sarah. She's been the most involved in my day-to-day life, and I know she'll take care of it properly." Sarah squeezed my hand. I felt a wave of relief. "See," I told myself, "we were investing in our own future." "My savings accounts will be divided equally among all three of you," Pat continued. "I've been blessed to accumulate a nice nest egg over the years." Jennifer smiled. "That's wonderful, Mom. You've always been so responsible." "Yes, well, I've had some help along the way." Pat's eyes flickered toward Sarah and me. "Some unexpected blessings that have allowed me to be more generous than I might have been otherwise." There it was, the acknowledgement. She knew. But then Pat said something that made my blood run cold. However, I do want to address something that Margaret discovered during her review of my finances. "It seems there have been some irregular deposits into my account over the years. About $1,800 per month." David frowned. "Irregular how?" "Well, they appear to be coming from an account belonging to Marcus and Sarah." The room went dead silent. Jennifer looked confused. David looked suspicious. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear. "Now," Pat continued, "I've discussed this with Margaret, and she's advised me that these payments could be considered loans rather than gifts, depending on the intent and documentation." "Mom," Sarah said quietly, "we never considered them loans." "I know, dear, and I'm grateful for your help. But the thing is, if they're gifts, they could have tax implications for my estate. If they're loans, well, that's a different matter entirely." I felt like I was watching a chess match where I didn't know the rules. "What are you saying, Pat?" "I'm saying that Margaret has calculated the total amount of these deposits over the past 5 years. With the interest that would typically be associated with a private loan, it comes to approximately $127,000. $127,000. I'd known it was a lot, but hearing the number out loud made it real in a way that all my mental calculations hadn't. "The question," Pat continued, "is whether this amount should be deducted from Sarah's inheritance, since it represents money that's already been given to me, or whether it should be treated as a loan that needs to be repaid to the estate." David's lawyer instincts kicked in. "Mom, what exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that we treat these payments as they were intended, as gifts from a loving daughter and son-in-law. But I also think it's only fair that this generosity be acknowledged in my will." She opened the folder and pulled out a document. "I've had Margaret prepare an amendment. Sarah will still inherit the house, but the value of the gifts she's already given me will be subtracted from her portion of the liquid assets." Jennifer was looking back and forth between all of us. "Wait, I'm confused. Sarah's been paying your mortgage?" "Marcus and Sarah have been helping me with expenses," Pat said carefully. "I've been blessed with their generosity." "For how long?" David asked. About 5 years. 5 years? Jennifer's voice was getting higher. You've been paying Mom's mortgage for 5 years and nobody told us? I wanted to explain. I wanted to tell them about the pride, about the secrecy, about how we'd been trying to help without embarrassing their mother. But before I could say anything, David jumped in. "This is completely inappropriate," he said, standing up. "If Mom needed financial help, that's something the whole family should have discussed." "We didn't want to burden anyone," Sarah said weakly. Burden anyone? Jennifer was fully upset now. "We're her children too. We had a right to know." And that's when I realized what Pat had just done. She'd taken our secret gift, our quiet, humble assistance, and turned it into a weapon to divide her own family. The Christmas family meeting turned into a full-blown family war. David was pacing around Pat's living room like a lawyer in a courtroom. Jennifer was crying, Sarah was trying to explain herself, and I was sitting there wondering how 5 years of good intentions had turned into this nightmare. "Let me get this straight," David said, pointing at Sarah. "You've been secretly paying Mom's mortgage for 5 years, letting the rest of us believe she was financially independent, and now you're going to inherit the house that you essentially bought?" "It wasn't like that," Sarah protested. "We were just helping." "Helping?" Jennifer wiped her eyes. "I've been worried about Mom's finances for years. I've been losing sleep thinking about whether she could afford to keep the house. And the whole time you were taking care of it without telling us?" "We didn't want to make it a big deal," I said, speaking up for the first time. David turned on me. "You thought it was better? Who are you to make decisions about our family's finances? I'm her son-in-law. I'm part of this family." "Are you?" David's voice was ice cold. "Because it seems like you've been treating us like we're too stupid or too poor to contribute to our own mother's well-being." Pat was just sitting there, watching the whole thing unfold. She had this expression on her face. Not upset, not surprised, just interested, like she was watching a movie she'd seen before. "David, please," she said finally. "This isn't anyone's fault. Marcus and Sarah were trying to be helpful." "Helpful?" Jennifer stood up. "Mom, do you realize what this looks like? It looks like Sarah manipulated the situation to make sure she'd inherit the house." "That's not fair," Sarah said, but even I could hear how weak it sounded. "Isn't it?" David pulled out his phone. "Let me do some math here. If they've been paying $1,800 a month for 5 years, that's $108,000 in payments. Plus interest and property appreciation. Sarah's basically been buying the house at 2017 prices, while the rest of us thought Mom owned it free and clear." "We never intended," I started. "I don't care what you intended," David cut me off. "I care about what actually happened. And what happened is that you two orchestrated a situation where Sarah gets the biggest inheritance while looking like she's been the most generous." Jennifer was nodding, and meanwhile, we've been sending Mom birthday cards with $50 inside, thinking we were being helpful. "You were being helpful," Pat said gently. "Every gesture matters." "No, Mom," Jennifer said. $50 for birthdays doesn't matter when someone else is paying your mortgage. We've been playing a completely different game than everyone else." That's when I realized what had really happened. Pat hadn't just been accepting our help, she'd been orchestrating a test. She'd been watching to see which of her children would step up. And she'd been setting up a situation where the winner would also become the villain. "You know what?" I said, standing up. "You're all right. This was wrong. We should have told you from the beginning." "Marcus," Sarah said, warning in her voice. "No, Sarah, they're right. We screwed up. We thought we were being noble, but we were actually being dishonest." I turned to Pat. "And you knew. You knew where that money was coming from, and you let us keep paying while you planned this whole thing." Pat's expression didn't change. "I was grateful for your help, but you were also planning to use it against us. I was planning to be fair to all my children. By turning them against each other?" The room fell silent. Sarah was staring at me like I'd just burned down the house. David and Jennifer were looking back and forth between Pat and me, trying to figure out what had just happened. "You know what?" I said, pulling out my phone. "I've got records of every payment, every bank transfer, every receipt, every conversation. If you want to treat this like a business transaction, let's treat it like a business transaction." "Marcus, stop," Sarah said. "No. I'm done pretending this was some kind of gift. If Pat wants to calculate interest and deduct it from inheritances, then let's be clear about what we're really talking about. This is $127,000 that I earned and paid to keep this family together. And if that makes me the bad guy, then so be it." I headed for the door. "Sarah, you can stay and work out the details. I'm going home." As I walked out, I heard Jennifer say, "Mom, what have you done?" But I didn't stick around to hear the answer. The next 6 months were probably the worst of my marriage. Sarah and I barely spoke about the family situation, but it was like this huge elephant living in our apartment. She'd go to her mom's house for visits, and I'd find excuses not to go. David and Jennifer stopped acknowledging my existence entirely. Not that they'd done much of that before. But now it was official. The mortgage payments stopped, obviously. I wasn't about to keep funding a house for people who treated me like a con artist. Pat hired a reverse mortgage company to handle payments, which meant she was basically selling the house back to the bank month by month. The irony wasn't lost on me. After 5 years of me keeping her in that house, she was going to lose it anyway. But here's the thing that really got me. Pat never seemed upset about any of it. When I'd run into her around town, she'd smile and wave like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just torpedoed her own family over Christmas dinner. Sarah started going to therapy. She said it was to process the family dynamics, but I think it was really to figure out how to deal with the guilt. Because the truth was, even though we'd started helping with good intentions, somewhere along the way it had become about securing her inheritance. And now that inheritance was tainted. Meanwhile, I was dealing with my own stuff. 5 years of working overtime, of sacrificing our own financial goals, of putting someone else's needs before our own marriage. And for what? To be treated like an outsider at the end of it all? But the real kick in the teeth came in June 2023. Sarah came home from one of her therapy sessions with news that made my head spin. "Mom's been talking to David about the will again," she said, not looking at me. And he's convinced her that the fairest thing would be to split the house 3 ways when she passes. I set down my beer and stared at her. 3 ways? Between him, Jennifer, and me. What about the $127,000 we paid? Sarah's voice got very quiet. "David says that was our choice, that it doesn't create any special claim to the house." "Are you kidding me? Marcus, I know you're upset." "Upset?" I stood up. "Sarah, I funded that house for 5 years. I worked double shifts. I skipped vacations. I put off buying our own home. And now your brother, who hasn't contributed a dime, is going to get 1/3 of the equity I built? It's not about the money. The hell it isn't. Everything about this has been about money. Your mom turned it into a business transaction the minute she brought in that financial advisor." That's when Sarah said something that I'll never forget. "Maybe this is better. Maybe we shouldn't have been so involved in Mom's finances anyway." Better for who? For everyone. For our marriage. For the family. For your inheritance, you mean? She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. I could see it in her eyes. She was relieved. Relieved that the secret was out. Relieved that the responsibility was off our shoulders. Relieved that she wouldn't have to choose between her husband and her family anymore. That night, I made a decision that I'd been putting off for months. I called a lawyer. Not to sue anybody, I wasn't that angry, but I wanted to understand my rights. I wanted to know if 5 years of mortgage payments created any legal claim to the property. The lawyer, A guy named Tom Morrison listened to my whole story and then gave me the news I was expecting. Unless you have a written agreement stating that these payments were loans or that they created some kind of equity stake, they're considered gifts. You have no legal claim to the house. What about the documentation I kept? The bank records prove you made the payments, but they don't prove any expectation of repayment or ownership. I'm sorry, but legally, you gifted $127,000 to your mother-in-law. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat in my truck in the parking lot of his office and did something I hadn't done since my dad died. I cried. Not because of the money exactly, but because I finally understood what had happened. I'd been erased. 5 years of sacrifice, of putting Pat's needs before my own, of working myself into the ground to keep her comfortable, and it was like none of it had ever happened. When I got home, Sarah was making dinner. She looked up when I walked in. "Where were you?" "Talking to a lawyer." Her face went pale. "Marcus, you didn't—" "Relax, I'm not suing anybody. I just wanted to understand the situation." And I understand it perfectly now. I sat down at our little kitchen table and looked at my wife. Really looked at her. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." She nodded. "Did you know this would happen? Did you know your mom was planning to use our payments against us?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't know exactly what she was planning. But you suspected something. I thought maybe she knew where the money was coming from, and I thought maybe that was okay." "Because you figured you'd inherit the house anyway?" "Because I thought we were helping family." "No," I said, standing up. "You thought you were investing in your own future, and you let me believe it was charity." That was the beginning of the end of my marriage to Sarah. We didn't file for divorce right away. That took another year. But that conversation in the kitchen was when I realized I'd been living in a fantasy. I'd thought I was part of a family, but I was really just a bank account with legs. Pat died on a Tuesday in March 2024. Heart attack, quick and peaceful, according to the doctors. Sarah called me at work to tell me, even though we'd been separated for 3 months by then. "The funeral's on Friday," she said. "I know things are complicated between us, but I think you should be there." I almost said no. Almost. But then I thought about all those Sunday dinners, all those conversations about Pat's independence, all those times I'd bitten my tongue when I should have spoken up. I decided I owed it to myself to show up one last time. The funeral was exactly what you'd expect. Pat's friends from church, some neighbors, a few coworkers from her old job at the school district. David gave a speech about her strength and independence. Jennifer talked about her as a role model for women of her generation. Sarah mentioned her generosity and her ability to make everyone feel welcome. I sat in the back and listened to them rewrite history in real time. The will reading was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I wasn't invited, obviously, but Sarah texted me afterward with the summary. House split 3 ways like David had wanted. Savings accounts divided equally. A few personal items distributed according to Pat's wishes. No mention of the $127,000. No acknowledgement of the 5 years of mortgage payments. No recognition that the house they were inheriting had been kept in the family by someone who wasn't technically family at all. It was like I had never existed. But here's the thing about truth. It has a way of surfacing, even when people try to bury it. Especially in small towns like Sacramento, where everyone knows everyone else's business. About a month after the funeral, I was at Home Depot picking up supplies for a job when I ran into Margaret Chen, Pat's financial advisor. She recognized me immediately. "Marcus, right? Patricia's son-in-law?" "Ex-son-in-law," I corrected. "Sarah and I are divorced." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." She paused. "I wanted you to know, I always felt bad about how things went with Patricia's estate planning." "What do you mean?" Margaret looked around to make sure no one was listening. "Between you and me, I think Patricia orchestrated that whole situation. She knew exactly where those mortgage payments were coming from, and she asked me to discover them during my review." "She asked you to?" "She said she wanted to bring everything into the light before she passed. She felt like there were too many secrets in the family." I stared at her. So the whole thing about bank errors and irregular deposits was theater. Patricia was a lot sharper than people gave her credit for. But why? Why would she do that to her own family? Margaret shrugged. I think she wanted to see who would step up when things got difficult. And I think she wanted to make sure her children understand the real cost of independence. By destroying her relationship with them? By making sure they knew the truth. All of it. I thanked Margaret and walked to my truck in a daze. So Pat had known. She'd known everything, and she'd chosen to turn our secret into a weapon. But why? That night, I was going through some old boxes when I found something I'd forgotten about. A card Pat had given me for my birthday in 2019. Just a simple Hallmark card, but she'd written something inside that I'd never really paid attention to at the time. Marcus, it said in her careful handwriting, thank you for being the kind of man who does the right thing even when no one is watching. Your character means more to this family than you know. She'd known. She'd known all along, and she'd been grateful, but she'd also been testing us. Testing whether we'd keep doing the right thing even when it became difficult. Looking back now, I think I understand what Pat was trying to do. She wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She was trying to teach us something about family, about sacrifice, about the difference between love and obligation. The irony is that her lesson worked, just not the way she intended. David and Jennifer learned that their independent mother had been getting help all along. Sarah learned that keeping secrets from family members creates more problems than it solves. And I learned that sometimes doing the right thing means accepting that you'll never get credit for it. Would I do it again? Pay someone else's mortgage for 5 years, work overtime to keep their house, sacrifice my own financial goals for their comfort? Knowing how it would end, knowing that I'd be erased from the story, knowing that my marriage would collapse under the weight of the secret? Honestly, yeah, I probably would. Because at the end of the day, that house kept a 68-year-old woman safe and comfortable during the last years of her life, and that matters more than my ego. But next time, if there is a next time, I'm keeping the receipts out in the open, because the truth has a way of surfacing eventually, and it's better to deal with it honestly from the beginning than to let it fester in the shadows. Pat was right about one thing. Character is what you do when no one is watching. But she was wrong about something else. Someone is always watching, even if it's just you, and you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day. That's worth more than any inheritance.